Alright, Section 9, Cooling System. Engine Maintenance Manual number 252C for models 567C, engines 3rd edition, January 1957. We're on cooling systems. Alright, Section 9, Cooling Systems. A general description of the cooling system of the engine consists of the engine-driven central figure water pumps, replaceable inlet water manifolds with individual jumper lines to each line of the cylinder, has a head discharge elbows and outlet manifold through the cooling water is circulated. Central figure water pumps are mounted on the accessory drive housing, driven by the governor drive gear. Water temperature gauge, level the gauges, connecting pipe and filling and drain lines. Complete the cooling system with a representative of the schematic of the cooling system shown in section 8. Heat discharge water within the engine is cooled by either of the two different methods depending on the individual installation. Air cooling. The engine discharge water is cooled in banks of tubes of fin type radiators with force ventilated by the means of fans, either driven mechanically by engine or separate electrical motors. Water then is cooled, leaves the radiator, flows through the loop oil cooler, continues onto the water pump inlet where it is recirculated through the engine, cooling air emission to the radiators controlled with automatic operated shutters according to water temperature. Electrically driven with the cooling fans also function automatically. Thermostatic control according to the water temperature, so the mechanically driven fans are constantly driven at speed directly proportional to engine speed, while the others use eddy current coupling with the arrangements to vary with the fan speed according to the engine water temperature. Water cooling. Is if it's a sufficient supply of the raw water is available. The heat exchanger may be used with the applicable installation engine water temperature for these applications controlled with the automatic thermostat valve arrangement. Alright, B. Description pumps. The engine cooling water pumps are central figure type of the rotor counterclockwise. For the two pumps over the usually the 12 and 16 cylinders, only one pump with 6 to 8 in cylinder engines. The pumps are scary with the two parts numbers for the identified right with the left bank pump. The difference over the bank of the designation is only because of the position of the impeller housing the inline, enabling the lineup of the pump to discharge with the impeller housing position on either the pump that may be charged with the permanent other either bank engine bank. The various parts of the water pump are shown in figure 9.1 with the main parts with the impeller housing with the drive shaft housing bearing seal with assembly with the drive gear with the cross-section pump shown in figure 9.2. Pump drive shaft support with the main pump housing, two ball bearings supported with a steel spacer with the spacers covered with a felt pad with a receiving bearing lubricating oil with the oil cup and the housing and the outer bearings abuts a water slinger against housing and the telltale drain provide with the main pumping housing to dispose of any of the water leaks past seal. Engine 2, engine pump passages, pump discharge elbow conduct water from the pumps to the removal of the water inlet manifolds extending the length of the crankcase located with each air box 9.3. Each manifold is supported with the rear end plate with the two cap screws extended with the lower support end plate into the pledge and plugged end pipe locating the valves in the rear end of the pipe extended into the counterbore's rear end plate. Ensure the proper position of the pipe at the front end of the plate. The manifold protrudes and is held with the counterbore with the connection pump discharge the elbow with the seal ring chamfer with the discharge elbow with the fits around with the pipe make junction with the pipe discharge elbow with the front end plate watertight. Alright, each liner is individually supplied with a water manifold throughout the water inlet tube. To assemble the inlet tube is connected with a manifold saddle strap assembled around the manifold bolts as a liner. Gasket is used with the saddle at the saddle with the connections with it while synthetic. This shows your water pump section. This shows the elbow, water pump inlet, elbow, seat, water inlet, tube, saddle, manifold, cylinder head, siphon, tube, drain, elbow, cylinder discharge elbow. Alright, your rubber ring. Your rubber seal ring is used with the liner with the deflector. Used with each of the liner water inlet shown in section 4, turning the water to prevent the direct impingement of the inner liner wall. The water enters the cylinder head through the 12 discharge hole with the top line with the counterbore around each of the hole accommodates the water seal ring. Single water discharge elbow figure 9. 3 holes for each of the cylinder head provide with the water past water discharge manifold extend along with the top of the crankcase for the cylinder head water discharge Elbows are applied with each of the cylinder lead head before installation and active with the proper position each of the cylinder head. Seal rings are used after the elbow connection. Seals may be replaced if required by the removing the elbow at the first, removing the crab over above it with distributing the cylinder head with the tube designed with the discharge elbow siphon tube. Elbows, two of which are used for the engine elbows, so without siphon tubes. Siphon tube extends down with the discharge manifold, the end closes to the bottom of the drain manifold with the engine water would have driven. It would be important to that the last cylinder head with the right bank with the first cylinder head with the left of the bank. Siphon tube water discharge elbow will provide with the engine cooling water drain. Engine vent of the engine is not level. Engine water temperature for the temperature gauge provide with the cooling system visual indicating the engine water temperature for the guide for the engine water operating with the recommended range of the recommended operating range. Water discharge temperature between 160 and 180 degrees Fahrenheit. Minimum water temperature of which the engine should be loaded as 120 degrees Fahrenheit. Automatic engine water temperature controls were used and set and maintained with a water discharge temperature approximately 150 degrees Fahrenheit, 180 degrees Fahrenheit range. Hot engine alarm where used indicates the dangerous water with the discharge temperature. Hot engine water would result due to the improper faulty water cooling equipment. Loss of the water engine load should be removed and speed reduced to the stop to obtain normal temperature in event of the hot engine alarm. Before resuming the operation, the cause for the hot engine alarm should be found and corrected. Find applicable instruction covering the hot engine temperature control settings for the publication index. Alright, the engine cooling water, the water used in the engine cooling system should be controlled so that hardness will not exceed 10 grains per gallon and the chloride content is less than 10 grains per gallon to prevent precipitation solids of the engine with the heated on the operating temperature. Addition with the water should be treated to prevent the rust and corrosion of metal and engine suitable inhibitor which is not detrimental to the engine seal of the cooling system. However, the pH value of the treated water should be within 8.5 to 9.7. Experience has led to the conclusion that borate type water inhibitor is satisfactory in every way with the engine cooling water with the National Illuminate Corporation code number 39 and Dearborn Chemical Company Dearborn number 527. Or either equivalent of the compound should be added with a treated water portion of 0.75 ounces per gallon. The conclusion has reached that evaluating types of the inhibitors previously used in cooling systems such as soluble oil and chromate types. Soluble oil is detrimental to the engine seals and cooling system. Hoses with chromate lend themselves to the personal safety risk and careless handling of a negligent personal hygienic procedure. It is important the proper concentration of treatment to maintain with the cooling water at all times. Most satisfactory type of the maintain addition with all stations wherever the water is added with the system equipped with a supply tank in which the good water having the proper amount of the treatment is always available. The proper water attention for the cooling system cannot be too highly emphasized. Failure to recognize the value would be most likely the result of the increased maintenance for the replacement and repair parts and damage for the engine and cooling system. Necessity flushing cooling system also will be increased information on cleaning separate oil heaters, electrical immersion to the type of the heaters. Alright, so cleaning and flushing of the cooling system is contained with the maintenance of the 1706 of the General Cleaning Bulletin. 2. Engine water heating. To prevent freezing of the engine water during the cold weather, the engine and temporary inactive some of the means of heating water must be provided with the method of the protection to live stream and the emission of the cooling system separate with a small water heater in either burning of electric or by engine idle. The engine cooling system is equipped with a steam emission with a check valve of all the system and a supply with the external source from the steam generator or units equipped with this. If the steam is supplied with the heating, the pressure is not to exceed 50 psi. Any of the overflow of the cooling system should be open to permit the condensation maintained with the desired water level. The disadvantage of the steam heating of the water is the loss of the inhibitor result of the weak solution. Separate oil heater, the electrical immersion type of the heater is applied with the heat engine water, with the number of the type of the unit, the frequency of the need of the heat available for the external heat supply, and other factors will influence the selection of equipment. See maintenance, cooling system piping, insulation, water inlet, manifold, assemble liner, water inner tubes, water tube, discharge elbows, present production 567 the C engine from the original model 567 the C engines. The reason for the difference for the present engine with the inlet water manifolds raised questionable eighth compared to the original engines. And engines that have a serial number 53J99 of the manifold with the cap screws passed through the bolt, lower support flange, and bottom of the tube of the bolts below manifold. But these bolts are below the blower support. Consequently, these bolts are no longer present with the engine, but they are greater than the beginning of the 1/2 20 by 2 1/4 compared to 3/8 20 by 20 with 1 and 1/41 as U the low manifolds into the one blower. The U the 6/8 cylinders of the manifold holding bolts opposite of the blower is shorter than 120 half 11 to 211 to 20th and 21 torque valley manifold holding both 75 80 foot-pounds. Low height manifolds identified with locating with the dial of the figure 9-3 with the center line with the dials present. High manifold 1/8 above the pipe center line 90 degrees vertical center line with a water discharge hole with a 1 1/8 of the part low manifold dial with a 3/8 inch below this the center line with a 1/3 eighth part with a few low manifolds do not have located hitting dials. Liner water inlet tubes to pump discharge elbows over all the engines. Same regarding construction. High manifold part shark consequently not interchangeable. Before tightening with the liner water inlet tube with the cap screw with the valve with the trap nut with the cylinder head nuts must be tightened, and the water manifold must first properly be positioned in application for the rear end of the head end bolts from the blower support flange and end plate. Location dial must be in counterbore to the end plate and a linear water inlet tube of this seal is used with the cylinder head discharge elbow and applied tube to linear, leaving cap screw loose. Apply saddle strap with the tightening strap with the nut finger tight with the leaving the sufficient space by trimming the pipe with the saddle with the gasket pin with the gasket slightly as you confirm the pipe in the place with the gasket around. Set with the long side across the pipe, the tight linear cap screw for 30 foot-pounds, tightening saddle strap with the 15 foot-pounds. Apply seal over end of the manifold. Apply water pump with the discharge elbow with the important last cylinder head with the right bank with the first cylinder with the head with the left bank for the siphon tube. Discharge elbow to permit drain with the water discharge manifold. The water engine is all the other cylinders have discharge elbows without the siphon tube. Seals and gaskets are identical to both low and high manifold engines. See respective part numbers for either other systems. Part C parts catalog number 90. A. Remove the pump. Drain the cooling system, mark the flanges below bellow section tube it can be reinstalled with the original position tube that is not flexible enough to bend, twisted, and stretch too far without damage. Remove the suction line and disconnect the pump discharge flange connection. Remove the pump mounting cap screws. Allow the pump to be removed from the engine. Remove the impeller. Remove the nuts holding the impeller housing. Remove the housing with the impeller housing can be more easily removed if the pump is held suspended slightly above the workbench by the hoist or other means improperly end down and taping on the hose, tapping on the housing with a raw or wooden mallet. Then remove the improper shaft nut with a washer and apply impeller puller to remove the impeller shown in figure 9 for the thrust. Cup, which is a shift for the removing the impeller. The cup with the parts of the impeller placed over the end of the shaft to protect the shaft threads. Remove the holding key. Replace shaft seals and stationary bearings bushings. Remove the impeller as outlined in item B. Remove the seal spring and seal assembly with careful prevent the damage stationary bushing seals for the drum of the seals assembly light resistance to remove the butter. Some quite firm on the shaft. Seals assembly tight on the shaft between the remove the stationary bushing. Remove the brass lock wire with the cap screw, stationary bushing. Remove the bushing of the may require with an insert of 3/8 of an inch by 2-inch cap screws and puller holes provided with the bushing figure 9, forcing the bushing out of the hosing. Bushing may sometimes be loosened and tapping of the bushing flange with a rawhide mallet allowed the removal without force. Alright, 4. Clean the stationary bushing pump shaft. The caution. Sealing surface of the stationary bushing is absolutely smooth and flat to prevent wear of the carbon washer with the stationary bushing with the rough of the surface may be refinished or replayed with the new bushing. And before applying with the stationary bushing, be sure that the bushing mounting surfaces are clean. The foreign material would be covered with the bush to cog and interfere with the effective sealing. Also, be sure that the smooth and flat carbon seal surface of the bushing is clean and dry. Apply new stationary bushing gasket and bushings with the cap screws evenly. Lock wire using brass lock wire torque of the 5/16 with an 8-inch screw. 18 cap screws, 16 by 17 inch pounds. After applying stationary bushing, check with the run out with a carbon seal surface with the indicator mounted on the end of the pump. The shaft run not exceed 1/1000th of an inch total. Shows water pump seal assembly exploded figure 9 and install pump seal assembly number 9-6. Alright, indicator reading of the 1,000 inches exceeded with a repositioning 180 degrees with the scrape off of the floor material with the areas hiding off of the reading of the mounting of the surface installed with the new assembly shown figure 9-5 with apply of the carbon water inner seal wash narrow end contact stationary bushing. Show for the carbon fade for the cleanliness applied with the out of the synthetic rubber to the shell with applied with the carbon washer with the either with a shell fit into the slab with the carbon washer one end with the driver end fits it. The shell with the other end must be fitted with the slot with the bottom of the impeller is assembled. Alright, D. Removing the pump shaft and the bearings. Remove the impeller housing, impeller shaft, seal with the stationary bushing as outlined in B and C. With remove the nut and the gear with the washer for the drive gear with the pump shaft. Remove the gear using the gear puller set. Remove the bearing retainer snap ring with the bearing retainer ring. Press the shaft, the bearing and assembly of the outer housing from the impeller end with the copper or other soft metal block protecting threads of the shaft. Then unscrew the oil cup of the several turns over the shove of the tip of the nap retrieve with the restrict the pressing of the operation. 6. Pressing the assembly, bearing assembly off of the shaft from the gear end. Note, press pump shaft puller and gear puller may be used to disassembly assembly of these parts, but this press is not available to fulfill all parameters shown by the application of the tools. 7. Clean and inspect the defects of the replaced parts. Bearings will seal in the shields with both sides should not be washed, wiped clean, and inspect the bearings of the excessive play with the roughness and seasoned galv with the worn and braided with the surface broken and bent with the seal with the shield with the fractured ring with the rusted discolored ball with the raceways, pump shaft seals, contact surface must be smooth, see the specification for the damming limits. Pump assembly. Assembly the water slinger outer bearing with the space for the inner of the bearing with the pump shaft, making sure that the rear bearing with the retainer ring is in position correctly within the retaining ring to the outside. But these parts are assembled with the first with the slinger next to the shoulder on the shaft concave side with the torque of the impeller end with the followed by the outer bearing without the retainer space and inner bearing abutting each other snugly with the sides of these bearings over the outer ends of the assembly being distinguished with the seal of the side of the bearing protruding slightly beyond the outer race. To apply the shaft of the bearing, assembly the support of the housing proper, replace the impeller end with the inlet flange of the impeller housing, provide with wooden block having the center bore to allow the shaft end to extend down. Starting the assembly of the housing, tapping lightly with a wooden mallet, wrap the oil-soaked felt pad around the space of the first bearing, clears the house boss, so count down with the assembly while the outer bearing rests on the housing boss. Note if the felt pad feels gritty or dirty, it replace with the new oil-soaked. First, apply the bearing retainer with the snapback ring bearing. Apply the drive gear shaft with the pulley tabs outside of the key. Check the shaft key with a way fit with a pump shaft diameter 2 gear bore fit 1/1000 of an inch loose maximum. Inspect the gear nut insert with the free with the tail with the disintegration nut may be reused. The fiber collar torque 92 inch pounds. Gear nut 1 inch by 14 torque of the 265 pounds. Apply stationary bushing with the gasket housing and replace seal assembly given in item C. F. The installer of the impeller of the Figure 9/7 that shows the impeller pressing on the tool and using the threading the whole old thread bushing tools screwed on the pump shaft with threads. Then installing the pump propeller, Figure 9/7. Alright, by turning the outer portion of the tool of the impeller is pressed in with the position, care must be taken with the start of the impeller, starting with the shaft with the C with the key and the way aligned with the improper impeller, engine seal bearing with the slot under the impeller with the check with the insert of the impeller shaft, now with the free with the tear of the disintegration with the nuts may be reused with a fiber coil. Our torque is in 32 pounds with the torque value with the impeller shaft nut is in 80 pounds. Apply to the impeller retaining or wash nut with the impeller housing with the new gasket bushing housing. G. Installing pump. The impeller housing with the position differently when on the pumps used down with the right and left bank of the engine before installation of the pump. Determine whether the pipe is used with the right and left of the pump is used in the right and left over the bank and with the relative position impeller housing relation to the oil cup of the pump housing shown figure 9-8. An arrow cast at the edge of the flange of the bottom of the pump with the flange impeller housing. R for right, L for left. The right hand pump with the symbol with the impeller housing with the right, the opposite for the air with the left hand pump with the L. Should be opposite with the air. Water leaks if the loss for the water, but the cooling system is noticed for the check for the leaks of the piping and the pumping seal with the jumper tube. Alright, shows the impeller housing is the right hand and water pump and the left hand water pump, and your front end view of the engine. And connection cylinder head with the elbow junction with the head with the line with a possible crack with the liner. Cylinder head with the use the very obvious location crack with the cylinder linear and the liner very difficult to find. Requires careful examination indication with the water leak with the headliner. Surface required with the removal of the inspection cylinder tire interior from the inner liner ports. The one place wall that might leak. Interloop oil with the cylinder head with the outlet elbow seals will be replaced without the distributing cylinder head with the crab. Even the crab to remove the lubricating oil contamination water will necessitate drain the oil with the flushing system which outlined in maintenance instruction 1757 before oil is renewed. Lube oil contamination is determined by the laboratory analysis, but its absence of such means of Method of cracking the water oil is as follows. Draw the dip of the gallon and lube oil over the bottom of the engine. Lube oil with a stone with let stand with about 10 minutes split. Then split 3/4 of the oil and then from the container. Place with the retaining 1/4 in the glass bottle. Allow the sample to stand for another 10 minutes with the water indicating on the bottom of the bottle. It's suggested the lube oil system should be drained, flushed, and replaced with new oil after the surface of the contamination is eliminated. For additional cooling system, different information. Two prohibitive length required to cover completely all the details. Cooling system separate maintenance instruction. Have the written listing of the instruction over the sort of the publication. Index convenient reference. Part D shows your specification, water pump speed, pump capacity, pump drive gear backlash, dimensions, and then the fuel section 10, fuel system section 10. And then we cut the tape after each chapter. Testing.